Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Disc Guidance segment with the 2MK team. We're doing a minor sound check as we're not used to using things in this game, but it seems to be working out so far. Therefore, let's go into our stream for today. Today we are looking at bots in Dead or Alive 6. We, a couple months ago, said we probably weren't going to do these based on what little we got from the beta. But after a bit more checking, after the game became available easily, we found there's not all that much that you can do, but there's enough that you could learn something if you're not too familiar with the game. And more importantly, since Core Fighters is now available, and we are able to expect to have more people playing the game, we figured there's no harm in at least putting out a bot for the first couple of characters. Specifically the ones that are always available, and we hope to have all 4 of them, although there's a chance we may only have 3 by this Sunday, our usual release time. The bot we'll be showing on stream today primarily is Bass, because he handles a lot of things that make explaining bots in this game helpful. We may also have a look at DoA later. DoA is a little harder to input, and the input system for this game is a little more complicated than most games we deal with. It also doesn't save bots in certain situations, which we will get to later, but just generally assume that if you make any changes whatsoever, your bot is gone and you must re-input it. Therefore, it was even more important for us to work on simple inputs, or at least very recognizable inputs. Contrary to our normal disc guidance where we talk about the inputs, show them off and so on, since the game also does not give you a way to show the inputs of the bot, this is not entirely unfamiliar to us, but it's definitely an issue in this game because of the precision with which certain things happen input-wise. There's not going to be a lot of point in showing off in the normal way for our disc guidance segments. And since we know that people often use these as references for bots later, BassBot will be described and explained as is before we go into any discussions of base concepts. And by that I mean base concepts of bot work. If you're not familiar with them or just think you need a brush up on how bots work in general and what they're for, especially relative to the new style of DoA bot because of it being a 3D game and similar things, that will be covered a bit later in the stream. But for those of you who really just need a couple inputs and some demonstrations of them, we'll be doing that at the beginning. As for Diego, he will get his own disc guidance, and therefore, even though you will get some mention of his stuff, it's going to be similar to Bass. At the beginning of the Diego section, if you're watching this on YouTube later, just push through until you see Diego somewhere and find the beginning of that section, and it probably will be quite quick from there. So, skipping all of the main explanation as to how to get these things to work in the first place, we're going straight to this part. In order to play specific replays, you turn them on and off using these check marks. You can have it display the recording information or not as standard, and you can start replays from this particular menu option, specifically this menu option. This is particularly important when you change the replays, as I'm about to do, to show off the 3 inputs you should use if you want to input BassBot. You cannot see it, and you would not be able to tell from the inputs, but this actually starts with forward kick 6K. Again, I'll go into exactly how you do the beginning of these recordings later. This is 6K down, i.e. 2, H plus K. Quarter circle forward, P, N. Quarter circle forward punch and N. So once again, 6K. Within that 6K you need to hide a 2H plus K, 236, a quarter circle forward P, and end the recording. You can in fact now see he has finally changed randomly to doing that part. So good job, Bass. His action 2 again, not too easy to see because of the way it interacts, but you do get to see that kick there. That is his 1K down back kick. For this input, you just tap 3 buttons in quick succession. 1K, 1 hold, 1 throw, quarter circle back, P plus K, and end. The quarter circle back P plus K is what is causing that elbow style move. And finally, recording 3, also relatively simple. 1P, 5H plus K, 6 throw. You got to see a little bit of it in combination earlier, but I will turn them all back on for a little bit here to show how this works in general. Since one action can flow randomly into another, you do not know exactly which move will follow any of his 3 action enders, giving him a much larger variance of moves and strategies for you to deal with. Bass is not the easiest or the really beginner bot that we intend to actually release. Hitomi will be. Hitomi will teach you how to hold, in general. Bass is a little more complicated because Bass teaches you when not to hold and changes some of the timings, i.e. he is supposed to be used when you already have some idea how to hold certain things and are comfortable with hitting the input required to do the hold, as well as dealing with throws and certain levels of attacks from certain ranges. But none of that helps you if you are just getting into this game and not used to 3D games in general. You can watch some of our older DoA streams if you want to understand a lot of the principles of this game, or 3D games as a whole, but some of it is important relative to bots enough that I need to bring it up. Similarly, if you have not done things with bots before in other games, understanding what the purpose of them is and the precise way to make use of them can also be a little bit daunting, and I should mention that too. Bots are simply a way to practice something against not the CPU, so you can't worry about CPU cheating, leaving itself open. Even though bots constantly leave themselves open, your goal is different, and is repetitive enough to let you continue to try your goal really often. You know approximately how often certain things are going to happen, even if the CPU ceases to do a particular thing for a while. You can't be sure it will definitely do it again eventually. A bot is helpful because you can be sure that eventually a bot will do the thing again. Generally, you can build up skill this way and monitor yourself as well as testing your focus at thinking about multiple things in a match by counting some points to understand who is at advantage. On our website, the bot pages normally have a point system that scales in difficulty. You have to do more or less things. In most games, you are able to turn off the recovering health in training mode at least a bit. DoA does not currently have this function, meaning that there is no way for you to lose before you can get your points. You have to therefore keep track of two sides. You have to give the CPU points or time yourself, which is not really as helpful because it doesn't really give you an idea of whether or not you're advantaged or not. But starting off by timing yourself may be better, seeing how long it takes you to get to the usually 10 points required to consider it a success. Still, timing is not as good except at the beginner level because, obviously, you may not have the opportunity to do it. While the bot will do many things, your job is usually only to get points by countering 4 or sometimes 2 to 3 of them as you go up in difficulty. Other moves are there to make it hard to think about what to do, to react in time, basically to be caught off guard and simulate something closer to a real match where you are not just waiting for this move to happen. Most of us getting into fighting games learn how to do things by setting the system to do one thing and doing it repeatedly. But psychology doesn't work that way generally, and neurology is even worse. In short, it's extremely hard to build up a lot of skill at particular types of thing by just repeating the one thing. Even if you have multiple things, if you only set 3, most of the time you can just be right by accident often enough that you might start to feel like you're knowing what you're doing. Bots are generally meant to not give you that feeling too much, and DoA is a game where it's relatively easy to make bots that make you feel much more stressed, much more incapable of keeping up, and is therefore a lot more rewarding both when you do it and in terms of you building up skills. In 3D games, there's 4 things you have to understand that are not necessarily clear. The first is that hits are generally high, low, and mid. Mid hits cannot be blocked crouching, so your default block position is no longer down back if you are a 2D game fan or even just have been introduced to fighting games through the standard, more popular games. If you came from Tekken, you'll understand this. If you came from Street Fighter, not so much. Holds, therefore, are also high, mid, and low, but you don't always know which one of them it is just by the animation. Some things can be ambiguous enough that you don't know for sure. And this game has the 4-way hold system in which the way you hold punches like that is a different input than the way you hold kicks, adding to the overall stress of the thing. Timing of holds is also important, but not really to the 3D game concept. Crouching has, in this game particularly, 2 additional helpful points, and it will be very important as I'm explaining later. When your opponent crouches, your high throws do not work, and your quicker high moves, such as Sumi's quick jabs you're seeing here, until she hits about the 3rd hit, you can even see at the bottom of the screen it tells you specifically what type of move it is the lowest line in the skill info. The first 2 hits of that combo are in fact high, so she cannot hit base when he is going low, even in the case where it's a move's animation that takes him through that space. it is possible for a move to make a character temporarily low. Temporarily the equivalent of crouching, meaning that you cannot strike them with that or with those high kicks you just saw. However, they can make their way through your attack, and given the length of animation of most moves in this game, you're likely to lose out. This is also going to be important for many of our bots and very important for this one. So bear it in mind when you're watching why certain things are happening. The high, mid, and low interactions can cause certain things to happen that might not be so familiar if you are not used to 3D games. But now, therefore, let's get into the technical and somewhat boring part of the stream, talking about exactly how to do this and the many limitations on the training mode for bots and similar. In other words, it's menu time. This game did, I mention, have a problem. You cannot see the inputs, you cannot check them. The simplicity of the inputs helps quite a lot, but the timing is difficult in many cases, and in general, no matter how good you are at fighting games, taking a random sequence of moves that don't even combo and stringing them together correctly takes about as long as learning a new combo. Fortunately, you only need to do it once, but if you have any problems with the interface, it can make things difficult for you by causing you to do it more than once in various ways. We're going to try to explain how to minimize this happening to you. Com recording is the method to do this. It is next to last option on com actions. Interestingly, if you are already on com recording, you have an easy way to start this without hitting the button too many times and getting your mind shifted to your right hand. If you press forward on the pad or stick at this point, when you are highlighting com actions with orange, it will move to com recording. If you press forward again, it will move to this menu. Therefore, you can just keep on mashing forward because at this point forward doesn't do anything else. So just mash forward to get to this menu, take your breath, take a moment to get your breath, and make sure you use the correct things on this menu. We will be re-recording some of these later, or possibly for Diego, to show the precise system, but when you hit X at this point, the recording starts. It does not take the X. If you are familiar with our Unist bots, you are able to hold down the X button, and whatever button you assign to X will be accepted as an input. DoA does not have this function, and it does not need it. You can simply press the next button in sequence relatively quickly. The game has no edge shifting, something that we are building from other games where you do quarter circle motions and end without hitting a button, and then hit a button at the beginning of a different input to get a move. So far we have had no success in doing that with either dashes or quarter circle moves. This simplifies the inputs quite a bit because it means that all quarter circles are completely contained within their input with their corresponding button. Once you've set it to record to 1, you must end the recording with options as usual, and then very carefully move to either replay to check it, or if you're confident for some reason, to the next recording. If you press circle out of this menu at any time after pressing options without changing to one of these three things, it will continue recording and lengthen your recording more than you wish it to and force you to do it all over. This is the most frustrating thing, so pay very close attention to it. I'll repeat it for that reason. If you make a recording, hit options to end the act of recording it and go back to doing nothing or come to this screen anywhere here and think, oh wait, I forgot something, and press circle, it will continue the recording you were doing for various reasons. It treats it as COM recording, record to X, and it continues from there. The only way to make it start over when you think you have not done the recording correctly is to come this far and start it with X again. This shouldn't be too problematic. It is the way that we do nearly all other inputs. But if you're familiar with bots, you're probably used to being able to leave these screens without messing up the current recording. There's usually a button for that, depending on what you highlight. In this game, you can't just not be highlighting certain things. You must highlight specific things. We demonstrated earlier how to replay actions by themselves. This game does not generally have enough shifting for that to be helpful directly, but you do want to be able to look at them one by one sometimes, so please bear that in mind too. Specifically, that if you come and turn on replay 1 and go, okay, time to go look at it, and don't actually hit replay, you may risk, once again, lengthening your recording and being forced to do it over again. Another strong limitation of this game, you cannot change character at all. In many other games, we're used to being able to change character either because the bot saves completely, as in is part of the game save data, period, or it at least saves while you're changing your character. This game does not give you even that. If I change character now, even if I change Kasumi to a different character, even if I select base again, there will be no bot. And as mentioned, this is partially why we put a lot of effort into making sure these are relatively simple, or at least that you could get used to inputting them over time. The inability to see the inputs is not such a big deal. Since the inputs are mostly simple, and if you're even slightly familiar with the character, or even just took the time to check them yourself while recording, and didn't actually record immediately, you just went, okay, what do these inputs that are on the bot page, what are these supposed to do? What is it supposed to look like? You should be able to work out generally how it will go, even though sometimes hidden inputs may cause different interactions. Mostly you should be able to figure out what you want. But an important factor for DoA is that most characters have back stance, and back stance changes the precise way that their moves animate. This is meaningful both for learning to counter moves, because they can look unfamiliar, even if all that really happened is that your character changed direction, and because if you somehow ended up in back stance, at the end of a recording, the move will come out differently. Even though the bot actually doesn't care, it will probably replay it correctly. And it also changes the moves certain characters do altogether, extending their options, but also making it more difficult to make sure that you have everything correct if, let's say, something ends in back stance and you want it to replay. Our bot pages will normally give as much explanation as possible to make it clear to you what is supposed to be happening and what you are likely to see as a result of replaying an input by itself. Generally there will be videos, but leniency is a term that we use to talk about how quickly and accurately you have to input something for it to actually work, i.e. how different it can appear from the thing you're seeing on the screen, or the general flow overall before the bot stops serving its purpose. Leniency comes in two forms: leniency of inputs and leniency of bot itself. Obviously, leniency of inputs comes first. But we will describe them in two different ways. Leniency of input is basically, how hard is this to put in? How much effort should you put in when you feel like it didn't go quite right? And leniency of bot is basically, if it looks right, but you're still not confident for some reason, at what point does it stop serving the purpose? So far we haven't found a DoA bot out of just the 4 we've been experimenting with that fail their purpose, but we are used to inputting these, and even being used to inputting these as a whole doesn't help too much with this game. It will take quite a while. In fact, there will be quite a long period in the stream where it's, again, just me trying to input DiegoBot. And he is relatively simple. We will discuss more about leniency and similar things at that time. The main thing BassBot is for is to teach you to sidestep. He has moves that track, but only some of them track well. He also has a lot of moves that if you sidestep them correctly at range and happen to counterattack at the right timing, you get a good combo or punish. He also has many moves that are slightly off from your expectations in terms of how to hold them, both in timing and what exactly they are. Even though they look like a certain thing, they can be a little different, and he has even some differences in those 2 kicks you just saw, where he's actually doing 2 different heights of the same kick, which is troublesome enough because a kick at mid must be held with a forward hold, and a kick low must be held with down back hold, making the whole thing even more stressful. Similarly, he also throws and has some delays in his sequences that would tempt you to hold, but unlike many characters where he just does a specific combo and you can hold him out of the middle of it, he basically doesn't do any specific combos. Even if you think that he's going to do a specific move because he tends to, he does almost always have the option to do a different move. If input correctly, you therefore can never actually know what comes next and can only hold base by actually responding in time to the button he's hitting. He also spins quite a lot, bringing us back to the, oh, I can't hold this because it doesn't look quite the same when he's standing forward versus backward. And he tends to hit with a lot of lows, so if you're not familiar, you tend to get up in trouble. He also has enough mids that you can't just hold down back as I'm about to do, because you'll get hit by that, for example, or thrown like this, since you're not moving back out of his way, and so on. So even from just this, you can learn a lot about this game, and if you have no other experience or input, since unfortunately HitomiBot is actually slightly harder to input, you can skip straight to him and hope that you can get through the requirements of BassBot as a whole. He also teaches you the fact that you can't tech certain throws, that being the one in question. If the opponent is advantaged enough by their strike, you cannot tech out of the throw. Most of the time this is not true because of the way that throws interact with things, but characters like Bass grapple strongly, and therefore you have to deal with this. We'll go into the psychology of it a bit later, but for now, things related to specifics of BassBot should be found on our website, 2-mk.org, after this Sunday. And maybe you can, I'm not sure if we will reach that point in the stream, but you could probably, if that's your interest right now, skip to the end of the stream, and if you see Bass again, it means that I actually managed to input him in the time allotted from scratch. And then we'll have a little bit of time to talk about precisely what it is you're supposed to do to get the points, or how to understand your options in terms of sidestepping and so on. The one thing I can tell you now is this is approximately the range you want to stand at. He has a lot of range as a character. You have to be very aware of his range and get your punishes and so on as best you can from there. You will be hit when sidestepping in certain situations. The important thing is actually what he hits you with. If you're getting hit by certain things, you've done something wrong. If you're getting hit mostly by his swinging arm low, as you've just seen, you're probably fine. Let's move on, therefore, to the structure of inputs actually doing this. And this allows you to get some input on what DoA is for and how much harder it is to input him. DoA is functionally more advanced than Bass is in terms of general interactions. He has a different goal system and is meant to teach you something entirely different. So, starting from the top, we will be going through how to do this exactly. On this screen, press forward once. The first time you begin any new recording from any new character, you have to change it to COM recording. From here you can press forward again, or X, doesn't really matter. And once again record to 1, and we will hit X to start this recording. Once again, you will not be able to see any inputs from me because they do not show. DoA is a half circle forward throw. 4, 1, 2, 3, 6 for those of you who use numpad notation. 4, 1, 2, 3, 6, throw, tap punch twice while the throw is animating or the throw whiff is animating. 1K, down back kick. 6, 6, dash forward. This is complicated enough that if you've never thought of doing this sequence for some reason before, it can be hard to just go, oh, let me put in all that immediately. We have found that generally in order to help yourself out, you can mess around with the character a little bit, make sure you know what he does. Unlike Eunice, there doesn't seem to be any real problem with how much of the recording is used up. So you can feel free to use up that entire recording bar and just relax yourself and learn all of the things he's supposed to do. So in this case, the half circle forward throw, you can see what that looks like. You can verify that it doesn't, that you didn't just end up doing forward throw or something. That's the forward throw. Again, you can see none of this in the lower display, but that's why you need to give yourself this time to be certain of what you're pressing. because his quarter circle forward throw will give you just his forward throw. But that is his half circle forward throw. And that one is different because Helena's back was to Diego. But once you're in that position, you can take your time and work out all those things. You can press X or forward to go through this. Once again, we suggest pressing forward, and it will restart the recording. As you can see, the red bar that is now progressing was much higher before. However, if I press Options to get to here, and then press circle, note that the bar stays where it was. In fact, even if I go this far, I have to press something specific, but I can press Options to get out of here. And whereas normally that would make you think, okay, let me reset my head, I'm good now. At least that one was fine. If you happen to press Options accidentally there without moving to the next thing to record, and sometimes even when you do, it continues to record action 1, which is super important. Moving back to Diego specifically, therefore, half circle forward throw, hit punch really quickly twice, down back kick, forward dash. The forward dash is probably not going to be visible, but we're not absolutely sure about all the hiddens and not hiddens yet. I can be fairly confident that the punches are hidden. The forward dash, not so much. It depends on your speed. And that is where the concept of leniency comes in. So I'm going to attempt to record this whole thing once without any prep, without anything. Long sequences like that tend to cause you to flinch because you must recall them all from scratch. They're not a practiced combo that you know how to do. So far we have learned one of the better things to do is actually to try from the N and come forward. So in this case, 1K forward dash input, it buffers it fairly well, so I think it doesn't hide it all that much. And then you start putting the punches in front of that, for example. And note that the 1K failed, at least, unless it was part of a combo. It could be though. You have to be careful with this as well. Whether or not the thing comes out as part of a combo correctly has nothing to do with you because hidden inputs act differently. That one is a combo differently, so there we see that. I'll demonstrate by replaying this input now, even though it's not correct yet. You won't see the forward dash because he's too busy doing the kick. There may be a spacing or timing where you can actually get the forward dash to happen, or it could be that I failed the forward dash, which is usually a problem when it comes to these things. You won't know if certain hidden inputs were actually hidden or not. But do your best. It's a little lenient on the forward dash part, so you don't actually care too much for this thing. And leniency, as I said, will be discussed in the bot page to tell you how lenient inputs are. So we're going back to this half circle forward punch thing. But even then, I still have trouble with it because I can hit the kick, but I don't remember to press the direction. This is again neurological. This is about learning a combo that isn't really a combo and doing it instantly. If you train with bots a lot, you will start to learn these quote-unquote combos. In certain games, you don't bother at all because the system saves the bot for you, but you'll start to have to get used to them for this game until we are offered an option to do it some other way. So that looks as if I got it right, or, well, I guess no one else can see that, but I'm confident in it. So I'm going to try to replay it specifically. But it looks like I messed up the throw because that is a low throw instead. So back to the start. Since the recording starts immediately, unlike other games where you can wait until you press the first button, you do have to time it a little bit, so you can consider the first press of X, whatever that button is for you, to be the beginning of the input in itself. I have no idea. The kick felt wrong, so I'm just going to do it again. And this is the sort of thing that bot input is like even for simple games, as it is, once again, doing a combo that isn't really a combo, and you can't even learn the timing. In that case, put in too many buttons, and so on. But that one, I'm confident in. And part of the reason is because I know that if this is done correctly, the 1K is visible, and we just got to see it. So now I can carefully set this to replay. We know that that is the correct throw. That is a combo that works. The 1K was visible when I did the recording, so it doesn't really matter that it's not actually doing 1K that way now. And therefore, functionally, we can be sure that this input is now correct. Diego's other input. So we can now move on to recording 2. We're specifically checking it. And you might as well change this to replay 2 at the beginning of that, for simplicity. Or if you're the sort of person who likes to be reminded to change things at that point, that works too. Whichever way makes you mess up less. Diego's second input is quarter circle forward punch. I believe you hold this punch for a short time if you can, but not really very long. 4K, 9K, throw with no buttons pressed. The throw at least will be hidden. The 4K is probably also hidden. And then just hit punch 3 times and end. This is a longer input, but it's not terrible because you can relatively easily make yourself think of certain things. But we're still going to start at the end. We're going to go 9 kick, 5 throw, triple hit punch 3 times. And you do that until you are confident in that alone. Until it feels like a combo to you. Because if you think too much about it, it will be harder to do it in the timing. An easy way to test this psychologically is to just put one more input in front of it and look at how quickly you can go from this is easy to I can't do this anymore. And this happens to us too, in our recording, all of the time. I added the 4K and the ending of my recording went completely weird, as in I'm pressing weird buttons now. Because I'm hitting forward instead of punches? Why? I don't know. Just neurology. Just some character or game I'm used to. Some preconception based on the type of character I play in other games that is causing this to happen. But now I'm sort of there. And when you're down to the point where the last input is all you need, unless it gets really difficult, at that point you can probably try putting on the first thing. The problem in this case is that the first thing is 236 punch, which is itself work. But let's give it a shot. Nope. Immediately my mind goes, wait, what was I supposed to do after that again? You get used to this in bot input though. And because it's still a sort of practice, it might not be a terrible thing. Know that it will always show record to 1 even if you're technically recording to 2. Don't worry too much about that since you have to come back here to start it anyway. Right, so now I need to get myself to do back kick there, and probably once I've done that link, I'll be fine. So knowing that, I work on the 236 punch into 4K. And while you can't see it, I assure you I'm doing this wrong. But that time, I can consciously say that felt like I got it right. So let's, again, replay this very carefully. My punches might not have been fast enough. Or something else is slightly off in the timing, which is unfortunate. But for now, this is another thing about a perfect time to show off leniency in a different form. Is the bot's goal affected by that lack of speed? By that lack of my triple punches at the end? Or is it that I hit them really well and I was too fast and technically there isn't a problem? Because his 9K is a fairly long animation, maybe I hid some extra punches. And we're only going to find that out when they start to interact with each other. So we're going to move on to recording number 3. 3 is Diego's easiest input, thankfully. It is 4 PP, 6H, 4H, 1 PP. This is still going to have the same problem of being difficult cognition-wise, but it's not hard to physically do, at least. The main thing is that you have to move to 6 hold, then back to 4 hold after the punches, and still remember to go to down back. I got close. I just hit the wrong thing at the down back stage. So, this one is, again, not that hard. And I believe that, in fact, has done it. So we should now have a Diego bot. And I will be handing this off for a little bit while we discuss the Diego bot and potentially whether or not the leniency is insufficient and we will somehow need to redo something about action 3. But we're checking this one. That looks like a hold in the right place. He's not doing back punches, but that's also timing wise. That happens at the beginning, fine. This is actually partially the reason why we say that the game does not really need the very, very early input edge shift type. It seems to ignore the first 2, meaning that having that natural pause from other inputs moving to these ones is better, and it is the way that we do edge shifted combos in the game. So one more time, we will look at it. They don't seem to work to each other, but it's fine. You can see, if you need to verify it, go replay it by itself when the character is not in any animation, and you can see the 4 PP and you can verify it. This is not always true, even for things like Bass's kick, as mentioned. So this move definitely stops being visible, for the most part, when just replayed, because of his animations. So we stop him. Preferably when he's doing something less troublesome. But even this is hard to do directly. Still, there's our verification. So, as of now, remember please that the leniency question is on his action 2. Did I hit punch enough times? That's all that matters here. Did I hit them hit it enough times and in the right timing? So we will go into some discussion of whether or not this is done, but we can also check on Diego himself and discuss what he's for, at least mildly, while we look at his potential problems with leniency. And for this we turn on all the inputs once again. The main thing you are aiming to understand against Diego is how to defend yourself from being pushed to the corner. Oh, there's the punch. So the leniency question is answered. We do see the punches required. Anyways, if you're not familiar, Diego's main strength is that he's often advantaged. He's advantaged enough that once he gets in close to you, you have to think very carefully about what is about to happen to you, because you can't get out easily. Therefore, holds are important. Understanding when you can and cannot challenge his buttons is important. And a lot of throw style with punishing is important. Learning that you can hit Diego because he's too far from you to do his own moves, or you can hit him because he's not far enough. I.e., he will basically end up in your throw range if he sticks out a button, for example, but you won't get hit by that button. He's functionally a close range with punish style character. In terms of what the bot is for, he's certainly not that type of character in standard play. But like the others, he also has enough mids, lows, kicks to make holding him hard enough that you can't just do it. And he will relentlessly try to beat you up. He also has an extremely long range on that half circle forward throw we mentioned. But unlike Bass, he can be sidestepped a lot more easily when you see certain moves coming. Your test therefore is sidestep Diego and deal with him so he can't get in to make you block and start pressure. But you can't sidestep the way you can against Bass. If you sidestep against Bass, you'll get hit like in a simple way that you understand, and the situation doesn't generally get too bad. If you sidestep Diego incorrectly, you will get beat up, and then he will get stuck to you, and you will have to figure out how to get away from him all over again. Therefore, you must not sidestep immediately. You can't just be walking sideways. He will force you into situations like that. You sidestep and then you guard, but he has multiple guard breaks, and even if they don't specifically give him direct advantage, they stop you from sidestepping. So your goal, i.e. to get out of the way of certain moves and get advantage, is still defeated by the fact that he does this. The speed of his attacks also means that figuring out whether or not you can hold him is a much quicker decision than with Bass. And keeping him out is also harder as a result. In short, you can't afford to block this character. You want to keep him at mid-range, but even once he's there, he has a lot of ways to close in, and you have to either hold these perfectly or sidestep them into an attack. Sidestepping them into an attack is difficult enough with a standard flow that you end up learning things about your character beyond just the sidestep. You understand and learn what exactly you can and cannot hit after the sidestep to gain something. And because his forward rushing throw has at least a little tracking on it, you cannot sidestep early. Meaning you can only sidestep when you know for sure that the move he is committed to is either his big swinging punch or his shoulder charge. He's also a character where the direction you sidestep, especially if he's advancing at the time, matters. So for his spinning back punches, which you've just seen, sidestepping in one direction gets you hit, sidestepping in the other direction barely gets you away from him at a particular range. So all of these requirements of range, understanding of spacing, understanding of the character speed, and when all of those things fail, it usually means you're finally in a position where you should actually hold against the character, as he has much more clear ranges. Basically, he can only reach you from this distance with this move. One that has a huge wind-up, and the other which is a kick. He does have the 1P, so you still always have to worry about at least three different hold inputs, not necessarily different heights of hold. He also has quite a few uncomfortable timings. But back to the question of leniency. So far we've found that the game itself is overall lenient when it comes to inputting these. You just press the right buttons, and because of the combo theory of this game, it will correct things and make them work for you if you press them either fast enough or with a close to correct sequence. You don't have to have a specific timing, a linking timing, anything like that. Generally, so far, we've only shown bots that you're not really supposed to hit back. But that's not entirely true for Diego either. You're actually allowed to hit Diego. The main difficulty is that you're supposed to only hit Diego with lows. This is not actually a full point system. But it is definitely part of it because, as mentioned, you are aiming to whiff punish him, and sometimes whiff punishing Diego from really far away, with particular characters, Helena being exactly that, like the archetype of that character, is to see him go for something, realize you could get under his next attack, or almost whatever it was. Either it won't reach you because you have such superior range on your low strikes, and any low he hit would fail, or he's going to do something that you duck under anyway. But this is also not something you can mash, nor something you can hesitate on. There's a very specific moment of recognition, and that's what he helps you learn. This also helps you focus because you must both sidestep if he does a really heavy committed move, and be ready to go for things like lows when he doesn't, since these two reactions are very different from each other. And in some cases, as just shown, sometimes he's just so far out that when he does the move you might not want to do anything. The situation shifts constantly. So he's good at teaching you to low profile things, while still posing enough of a threat that you can't just constantly low profile things. For example, if Kazuki Dynasty merely holds down back in this situation, he will clearly hit her with mids, and while he cannot land his throw, and you can learn things about when to duck stuff as well. This is part of the really advanced uses of this bot, realizing, okay, well, against some characters maybe you should duck a lot of the time. You still can't duck all of the time. He's also another good one for teaching you the real properties and helpfulness of your quicker buttons. Since if he hasn't managed to get himself close enough to get full advantage, your quick buttons might actually help you out quite a lot. In short, if he misses, your quick buttons are helpful. If you were forced to block, not so much. So we use Helena here to show off this function because she is among the best whiff punish style characters in the game, and even she finds this at least a little difficult to do. Diego of course has more options. He can beat a style that is based primarily around waiting for him to make a mistake and whiff punishing. But bots are generally for learning basics of the game and possibly to help you defeat first order strategies when you're just getting into it, against people that you fight online at the lower ranks who are just doing what most people would consider spamming things. So our goal is to help you understand how to approach the character, how to deal with first order strategies, and in this case to learn something else about the game itself, seeing as these are the base bots and therefore help with little beginner stuff. Bots also tend to have 1 or 2 rare attacks that are sequence based and come out because you either hit them in a particular spot, change their rhythm and flinch them, on top of all of their standard randomization. They keep on using some standard things if you leave them completely alone, and then if you interrupt them or happen to stand at a very specific space and it causes certain moves to connect in a sequence, you might get a slightly different behavior. If these behaviors are somehow important to the bot as a whole, it can affect the leniency of the bot. So you can bear this in mind in our future ones, because we may mention this in streams when doing particular disguidance content for specific characters. Once again, this does not count as the disguidance for Diego. Technically, it doesn't really count as disguidance for base either, but base is not a thing you really need to... Base's goals are easy enough to understand purely by reading them, and they don't need to really be shown, so he's unlikely to get his own entire disguidance segment. Hopefully, the website will be enough to help you with understanding what you're aiming to do against base, and you can just watch what we were doing on stream, even though it was mostly not actually succeeding at the holding part too much. That said, as promised, we may go back to this in a bit, but looking at the time, it's more likely that we're going to end this stream early, as it is a lot to take in for someone who is not familiar with any of it, and droning on is unlikely to be helpful. These bots themselves, therefore, should be all released on Sunday at 7 Eastern or sometime reasonably just beyond that, on our website 2-mk.org, almost certainly under the page DoA-bots. Since DoA 5 didn't really offer them in the same way, we don't expect there to be too much confusion. It may end up being DoA 6-bots for absolute clarity, since everything else does work like that, but it's going to be one of the two, shouldn't be too hard to find. Other navigation will of course be available to it, and you can check our Twitter 2_MK_FGC for information on the release. If it gets delayed for some reason, we will tweet when they're out, and if we don't get them out in the time mentioned on this stream, we will probably tweet about that too. The coming weeks should be therefore the disguidance for the 2 other absolutely confirmed ones, specifically Diego himself and Hitomi. There may need to be some more work done on the Kazumi bot, but since she would be 4th in the sequence anyway, in terms of disguidance, the flow for that may be different. Moving forward, we intend to, if the game continues to offer free characters occasionally, we will probably work on the bot for those characters within those weeks, so we cannot specifically give you a time frame for other bots. What we can tell you though is that if there are no such interactions, you will get at least the bots for the main characters and probably secondaries of all 2MK team members eventually, which covers about 9 characters. If you have any suggestions for bots based on these things, if you can take the principles given and come up with something, we'll be glad to share it. If you want us to test it out and look into it that way, we're also probably happy to do that, depending on our available time for that particular form of development at the time. But anything we don't have a character at all for, especially if you are someone who mains that character and knows all of the first order strategies, feel free to contact us. Our contact page can be found at 2-mk.org. But you can also contact us through our Twitter, as mentioned before. So in conclusion, look out for, once again, at least Hitomi, Diego, and BassBots for DoA 6 on our website on Sunday. And next week, another disc guidance segment. For those of you who follow our other content, we will almost certainly be having our Mishmashing Battle Lounge for Street Fighter V on Monday as usual. We are not expecting to have a Tuesday train, but may have some Sandbag Casuals Street Fighter V content on Wednesday. So no Guilty Gear next week. We did not have Kame House or Dragon Ball Fighters lobby yesterday due to all sorts of last minute weirdness and difficulty. But that one is generally more common, and you can also expect that next Thursday. So on behalf of the 2MK team, this has been Rillian. We hope these bots are helpful to people trying to get into Dead or Alive 4 Fighters, or just the entire game. Please remember that this game is in fact free to play, and characters for the game will set you back $4 to $6. You can also, of course, join our lounges for DoA, but as we are now moving into bot content, we don't expect to be seeing those for a while, as those only ever happen on the Fridays we're about to use for the disc guidances. And finally, please remember that all our other bots for other games can be found at the same website, mostly by putting the same sort of acronym for the game: SFB-bots, UNIS-bots, DBFZ-bots. Guilty Gear does not have bots and goes under GG Exercises. Hopefully the new Guilty Gear will have a different system, at least slightly, and we will one day have GG bots as well. In terms of actually using those, good luck with your training, and good night everyone.